Spanish-speaking community and help them out as well. And then I think I mentioned this in the beginning, there's people online, people here in person, and so we'll do our best to juggle questions and comments as well. But with that, I'll jump in Spanish and I'll hand it over to my colleague. Muy buenas noches a todos. Es un honor y un privilegio estar aquí con ustedes, aunque nos reunimos en momentos tan difíciles. Mi nombre es Dr. David Talavera y soy un psicólogo, parte del Center for Connection, el Centro de Conexión de Santa Bárbara. Además de participar en nuestra charla de hoy, también voy a intentar lo más que pueda a traducir lo que hablemos hoy. Y bueno, estamos aquí en respuesta al horror, la trauma, el estrés que las recientes redadas de ICE han causado en nuestra comunidad local. Queremos que esta reunión no solo nos junte, sino que nos traiga paz y esperanza al ver que estamos unidos. Aquí en el CFC de Santa Bárbara somos un centro de varios especialistas donde ayudamos a niños, adultos y familias para el bienestar mental. Aquí creemos que sanamos cuando estamos unidos. Y otra vez gracias por asistir hoy en día y estoy nomás dejando a más personas adentro del chat. Y welcome for those on the chat. I'm just saying a few words before we continue. Me acompaña hoy mi colega, Dr. William Lacey-Bisetty, quien es un neuropsicólogo pediátrico. El Dr. Lacey-Bisetty nos explicará qué le pasa al cerebro cuando vivimos con mucho estrés y cómo esto afecta a los niños en particular y qué podemos hacer para ayudarlos. Estamos aquí hoy para aprender básicamente 3 cosas fundamentales. Primero, cómo esto nos pega a los adultos y yo voy a hablar... Ups, se me cayó el micrófono. Yo en particular voy a hablar sobre el miedo que sienten es real, es válido y tiene un impacto en nuestro cuerpo. Veremos qué podemos hacer al respecto. El primer impacto en la familia, también vamos a hablar sobre el impacto en la familia y la comunidad. Y finalmente, ¿qué podemos hacer para apoyar a nuestros niños? Finalmente, antes de empezar, quiero que sepan que todos nuestros servicios en el Center for Connection también se ofrecen en español. Si usted o alguien que conoce necesita terapia, por favor búsquenos. Y también ofrecemos evaluaciones para casos de asilo. Al final de nuestra charla, les diremos a dónde pedir o a dónde pueden ir para encontrar más recursos en la comunidad. Gracias por estar presentes. Y con esto, paso el micrófono a Dr. Lacey-Bisetty.
Hi. And first, I just want to thank you for being here and communicating all this stuff with us, which just allows us to build these connections. And so I want to thank you all for being here tonight with us while we kind of come together as a community. And community is just a really important thing to me. It's something that, if you know me or heard me talk before, I talk about it ad nauseum. I won't stop talking about it because I think community is the foundation of our experience and our lives. And community to me is a source of love. It's a source of connection in the world. And right now, it has to be a source of resistance, a source of resilience, because there's a threat to our community. And it's not a new threat. It's a threat that's been here. It's a threat that is more overt probably than ever before, but it's this kind of system of stress and trauma that's being enforced on us. And with a group like ICE, the goal of a group like ICE is to divide us. It's to separate us. It's to make us fearful. It's to cause us to turn on each other and not want to be there for each other. And those groups are putting those things in place to destroy our community and individualize us instead of having us maintain. They want to separate us, but we're not going to let them separate us. And I think being here tonight is an act of that resistance, of stepping into this space together where we can, use our binds, our connections to push back against these systems that are, again, defined by separation, by fear, by violence. And so when those systems are in place, the goal is they individualize us, separate us, and then when we do that, we withdraw. And then we start to believe that our problems are individual, our stress is individual, our trauma is just ours instead of our trauma, right? Our stress because when we come together, we're able to push back against those systems. We're able to dedicate time together to not feel fearful, to not turn on each other. These systems have been around for a long time with the focus of separating us, the systems of colonialism, the systems of capitalism, systems of the patriarchy. And this is the strongest outcome of that right now because it's being supported by governmental systems in place to cause that increased violence and separation, where people are being kidnapped, people are being stolen, people are being taken away from their families, kids are losing parents, and these things are just supposed to be okay. And the rest of us are allowed to be caught in the violence and collateral damage of that as well, just because we are taught violence is okay. So I think that us coming here together in Santa Barbara and online in this community is to push back against those systems and structures and rely on our brothers, on our sisters, on our siblings to be here together, because they don't want us to rely on each other. So when we stand up together, we can push back against those systems and we can build community, love, connection, and that's the thing that can allow us to maintain while they try and divide us.
Great, thank you. We're going to move on to some questions here, and I just let people know here online. I'm letting people in, so I'm monitoring here on the chat on my computer. I'm not just on my laptop, and so. But again, for those who just logged in, you can feel free to mute your mic, turn off your video, put questions in the chat, raise your hand as well. I'll be monitoring it here on my end. And again, for those who logged in, Dr. David Talavera, and this is my colleague, Dr. Lacey-Bisetty. And to begin this next section, Dr. Lacey-Bisetty has some questions prepared, and I will do my best to respond to these, and I'll speak more to the impact that it's had on adults. And then I have some questions for Dr. Lacey-Bisetty, where he'll give us his background and expertise in neuropsychology and working with kids as well and families. So I very much look forward to that. So with that, I'll hand it over to
So like Dr. Talavera said, we'll kind of go over how ICE is affecting all of us in our community. Then we'll talk about how, as parents, you can navigate that space and how to talk to your kids, how to talk to kids at different age levels about their experiences, and then how we can use tools like play and time spent together as a way to help kids not only process but also express and find that space where they may not be able to put the words together. So I'll start by asking Dr. Talavera is adding this fantastic expertise here. So with the mass deportation operations across the country, many adults are feeling on edge or completely shut down and exhausted. Could you explain what is happening biologically to our nervous system during these times, and what are some practical things we can do to help cope or manage?
I love it. Yeah. I can't forget to use my mic here, and often so I'm going to use this as a mini mic. Thank you for that question here. And so I want to begin by giving a little bit of background about myself, because I really want people to really understand where this information is coming from. And so I'm a clinical psychologist. I specialize in behavioral health, chronic pain as well. And so this information, I really truly find it not just fascinating, but very personal. And I really hope that people really take this away with them as I let more people into the chat. To begin, I do want to say that this threat that our community is going through is a very real threat that affects everybody, regardless of race, ethnicity, age, documentation status. And it is something that is causing real, visceral fear, horror, terror, trauma, stress, you name it. And the adverse part of that is that doesn't only impact us emotionally, that also impacts us physically. So these and kidnappings that I truly see them as kidnappings where people are being taken off the streets and really not told where they're going, and their family members oftentimes are not told where they're going. When we're seeing that on the TV, when we're being told that by peers, and we're seeing that in the news, that elicits our fight or flight response. And I'm sure many people have heard of the fight or flight response, right? It's like our biological response to threat. And that's why I really name it as a threat, because our bodies, our brains perceive this as a threat. And so what happens is our bodies kick off this response, and it's called, a technical term is the sympathetic nervous response, where our heart rate starts to go up, our muscles tense up, or our breathing changes, and it's something that I've noticed personally. When I watch the news, I notice my shoulders start tensing up, I breathe a little faster, and all of that in the moment sometimes might not feel like a lot, but over time, those kind of drips of stress, those constant drips of adrenaline add up, and it becomes a flood for us. And so it's very important to address it, and it impacts us physically. It makes us more tired, it can lower our immune system, it impacts our memory, and Dr. Lacey-Bisetty will, I'm sure, talk about the impacts more cognitively, but it also impacts us emotionally as well. I'm just kind of thinking, I remember watching the news and being so on edge that I was kind of really in it, feeling all of these emotions like anger, stress, and really feeling that fight or flight, that when the Amazon package delivery person rang the doorbell, I just jumped and even got a little angry, something that I would have never done before. But that's because my system is overloaded, and I'm just...
So true. We're just on high alert all the time.
And I'm just on high alert in the living room. So what we can do about it is something very practical and very needed. Oftentimes what I recommend as a first step is see what you can control, what's in your control. When our fight or flight system is activated, our heart rate goes up, our muscles tense up, our blood vessels, they constrict. So it's hard for me to say, well, just dilate your blood vessels, or it's hard for me to just say, lower your heart rate. But what I can say is slow down your breath. That is something we can control. And so we do that because biologically, when we slow down our breath, our heart rate naturally slows down as well. And so let me see if I can mute. I think a couple people might have, by accident, the
and while he does that, I'll just add on a little bit of we can really focus on understanding our bodies and regulating that system, and taking those opportunities to do it, and also taking opportunities to connect with other people and commune together, right? Finding that space of communal knowledge and experience can offer that physical regulation as well, because these are natural responses that make sense that are occurring, and that shared experience aspect can help, and also the ability to kind of take opportunities to do things that feel culturally relevant to you, to experience and connect, right? To stay together in different ways, and that can include anything, physical, mental, social.
Absolutely, yeah. And
Talavera, you're still muted on our end.
Oh, you muted yourself.
Can you all hear me? I think it muted on that side.
Yeah.
There
You
we
did the
go.
whole mute thing.
Perfect. Can you all hear me okay? I think so. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great.
Okay, cool.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much. And that was, by the way, Vincent Gonzalez, one of our amazing AMFTs here. He's just
Yeah.
fantastic and a wonderful part of our team.
Yeah.
And also he's got some really cool stuff coming up that we'll preview later to be a continuation of this process we're talking about tonight.
So just to sum up this part, and the last part I want to add here is that it's more than just taking a couple breaths. When you slow down your breath, what happens biologically is something called the respiratory sinus arrhythmia. What that means is that when you inhale, your heart rate goes up a little bit. When you exhale, your heart rate goes down a little bit. So we can leverage that. So when we slow down the heart rate and we elongate those exhales, that's akin or similar to diaphragmatic breathing. And so we can slow our nervous system response to the news that we're watching. So in that example that I gave, when I jumped up from the Amazon delivery person, if I practiced a few of those breaths, my nervous system would begin to calm. And that's not going to take away the terror, the trauma, the anxiety, but at least it's something that I can do in the moment to regulate myself a little bit more so I can better be able to help out others as well. And so, yeah.
No, and it's just such important information, because a lot of this feels out of our control, right? And so anything we can latch on to it, be this is me, this is something I can do in this process, can really help us, as long as it's part of that web of us working together in that space, right? Because if you can't put on your own air mask, you can't help anyone else. So we have to make sure we take that time. And we'll touch on that even more when we
Yeah.
get to the parenting side of things, because it can feel really hard to take time for yourself when so much of your life is protecting other people and especially children.
Absolutely, and you know, just to comment on that, nothing happens in isolation. You know, what impacts you impacts others in the room. And again, in that example that I was saying, I was jumpy, and my wife had a response to that. Even our pet dog had a response to that. And so, like, nothing that we go through happens in isolation. Our kids are watching, our partners are nearby, and so it's important for that co-regulation piece that Dr. Lacey-Bisetty was mentioning.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
There's often a belief that if you aren't on the front lines of a protest, you aren't making a real difference. Can you speak to the value of smaller ways of helping and how those impact our mental health?
Yeah, great. So, I think that there's a myth out there that if you are not on the front lines physically resisting, or if you are not, the person with the bullhorn yelling something, that you're not doing enough. But that's not reality, and you don't have to be doing all of that to move this forward. You don't have to be doing all of that to make a difference. The reality is that a lot of what is actually very helpful is what happens behind the scenes in those protests and in this resistance. Those little things that are actually very helpful for two reasons. They help move this forward, but they also help regulate our nervous system. Because just imagine yourself being on the front lines of this day in, day out, what that's gonna do to your own system, and the amount of trauma and stress, and it's needed. But the point here is about pacing ourselves. And the key word that I think of is just endurance. We have to think about endurance for ourselves to really protect our community and be there for them when they need it the most. So the little things that we can do that are not on those front lines are really simple things. If you see or know someone who is scared about and truly terrified about their documentation status, about being taken, one of the things that I often recommend people is not to ask them, what can I do? Because asking them, what can I do, puts the onus on them to figure it out, and it's like, we're kind of overloading their system. We're adding to that already overloaded system of, hey, here's another problem. So what I recommend is going to them with solutions, not problems. And so going to them with like, gosh, I saw that your lawn hasn't been mowed in a while. Showing up with your lawnmower and say, hey, I'm gonna mow your lawn real quick if that's okay. If you don't want me to, say no, but if that's all right, I'm just gonna get started. Or, hey, I brought lasagna. I noticed that you haven't gone out, grocery store in a while. I brought food. Here it is. And so coming with solutions, even if you feel they might not land well, a lot of the times, it really is the thought that matters. But even little things make a big difference, because that consideration shows that you're thinking about them, that they're not alone in this. And so a lot of this is more than just showing activity or behaviors. A lot of this is showing, validation that what you're going through is hard, and I'm here to help out with that. So the last thing I want to mention there is just like a personal piece. And so my wife and I, we recently had a baby. She's 7 months, and when a lot of this was kicking off, we weren't able to go and protest as much as we'd like. And so a lot of this was frustrating for us. And I'm wondering if people here in the chat or here have noticed that for themselves, that it's hard to do things a lot of the times just because the circumstances. And my wife was literally healing, and I wasn't able to go because I was with our baby. And so it was frustrating, it was hard. And so the things that I had to think about were, one, how do I manage this frustration of not being able to help? And two, what can I do about it? And so this is where the little things are super helpful. And so I was luckily able to be connected with someone who I could translate for, with an attorney, and help them with their asylum case, or just advocating, even if it's just sharing and reposting, and that's all you can do that day, that's enough. And that moves us forward, that keeps the conversation going for a lot of folks. And so, again, little things matter.
Yeah, definitely. It's showing up in that space and showing up for each other, right? Using what we have and what we can give and making that what we offer, because different people are experiencing these things in different ways, and you have to use your kind of like privilege and your availability and your cognitive resources to step into spaces for other people that may not be able to, right? And then they're going to take that for you at another time, right? That's the community process, is that you give when you can, and then they give when they can, and then together you're working and moving forward.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
So, because we see news of raids on our phones, TVs, and laptops, many feel a deep sense of guilt if they stop consuming the news. How should we think about the guilt, and why is it important to manage how much information we take in?
Yeah, and it kind of touches on something I was just talking about. Not being able to do as much as you want, not being able to be on the front lines as much as you want. And so I am sure many people here have noticed that guilt for themselves, the guilt of not being able to help out as much or as often or in the ways that you'd like, or even if you're doing everything right, still feeling like it's not enough. And so part of this, and this is the hard part, is like having a little compassion with that guilt, because that guilt means, just from a purely psychological perspective here, that guilt means it's trying to protect you from that helplessness. Helplessness means there's nothing you can do. That guilt is kind of signifying, you know what, I could do something. Maybe I don't have the means to do that right now, but it's telling you, you know what, if I could do something, there's like a little bit of hope. And if there's hope, there can be change. And so that guilt, instead of kind of looking at it as like, oh, I hate feeling this way, it's like, you know what, this guilt that I'm feeling is actually a sign of love and care and support. So a lot of this is just channeling it into something else. Part of that is also not just channeling it and doing something, but a really hard thing for a lot of people is taking breaks. Taking breaks from social media, taking breaks from seeing the news, and that might seem very difficult for a lot of folks, because something that can come up for people is, but does that mean like I'm abandoning the cause? Does that mean I'm forgetting people? Does that mean that I'm not doing enough? And the response that I give to a lot of my patients with this is, it's actually, you're recharging, you're reloading, you are giving your nervous system break, not ending that resistance or fight. You're actually recharging so that you can be out there when people truly need it. When you do have to be on the front lines, you're ready to go. Or when you have to pick someone up who needs that picking up from school or a drop off, you are mentally, physically, emotionally capable to do that, right? And so a lot of this is noticing those two things, that the guilt is actually a sign of like deep care, and you don't always have to do something with it, and then taking a step back is not just helpful for your own nervous system, but sometimes needed as a whole, just broadly for this resistance.
Yeah, beautifully said. Yeah, it's a difficult process, and we're just kind of stuck in these cycles all the time, and finding a space to break free from it, to allow yourself to enter spaces and consume, is so important, because it's taxing on our nervous system, and it's like built to do that, right? Like the news isn't built to be receivable and feel good. It's built to induce fear and like cause stress and all those kind of things. And so to stay informed is to put yourself in position to feel stress, to feel disconnect, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's a big point there, that a lot of what's on TV is both, and it can be informative and also shocking. And the shocking piece, unfortunately, is part of a lot of our news outlets, that what drives clicks, what drives views, what drives people staying engaged, and what keeps us engaged is the emotional output that we give. And so it's very important for us to be cognizant of that, how much we're giving and how much of that is helpful and useful for us and the cause.
And like what we're consuming as well, because like where we're gonna tend to focus on like news sources that's the goal, right? Is causing that kind of like uptick and panic and all that kind of stuff, and you're not gonna feel connected to your community when you're going online or turning the TV on and seeing like stress, destruction, violence everywhere. And so that's why it's so important to like get your information there, but also like connect with the people in your community and see what they're experiencing, what they're getting, and add that as a source of like input for your experience with the world. So for those in our community currently facing the nightmare situation of a family member that's been kidnapped, attacked, taken, or those who are living with the constant fear that it could happen now, what do we tell them, and how can we support them through this trauma that sits?
Yeah, I'm just writing a couple of things that I think can be helpful here. So this is something that I've thought about a lot, because it always feels like it's not enough. It always feels like I can't take away the hurt if they have had someone taken away, or the fear that they're feeling, the paranoia that they're feeling when they go to the gas station, And so there's actually a lot that we can do, and one is just validate that fear. A lot of the times, for someone who might not be as informed, for someone who has the privilege to not be as informed, might hear someone say, I am scared that if I go to a business, that business is going to share my data. I am scared that if I go to a business, my face is going to be on cameras around me, or my data is being shared in ways that put my family and me in jeopardy. It might sound paranoid, but there's a valid piece of that, because that is happening, unfortunately, where departments of the government are sharing information of undocumented folks, where companies are sharing data of undocumented folks. Even hospitals have been asked to share information. And so it's not delusional, it's not unfounded paranoia, it's real. And so a big thing that we can do is validate that experience and say, yeah, like that fear that you're feeling makes sense. How can I help, right? So the first piece is just validating that experience. The other part is understanding, and this is specifically for folks who have had someone taken away, whether it's loved one, friend, neighbor. That is different from, it's a grief. It's a grief that someone feels when someone gets taken by ICE. Mm-hmm. That grief is different from losing someone after passing away. The grief that someone feels by seeing someone taken by ICE, it's an ambiguous grief, because the people in that family don't know where that person is. They don't know where they're going. They don't know if they'll see them again, if they will or if they won't, or what country they're in. And so their brain, their mind, they don't know how to really grieve in that sense. It's not like, okay, I know where they are and I can go to them and I can put flowers, or I can see them one last time. That's robbed of them. And so understanding that this grief is a different type of grief that is ongoing. So if you hear that grief, it makes sense that it's still there, even weeks, days, months afterwards. And if they don't know how to grieve, it's also part of it, right?
Yeah, and I want to expand on the grief piece a little bit, because I think the grief piece is so intense, and it's even when you don't lose someone, like the grief of the lost experience of what life you wanted to have or wanted to experience. Like, people are being taken from homes, and that means you aren't allowed to live in a community you thought would be a positive experience. The dream you had for what life would look like is being taken by these kind of governmental systems, causing us stress and harm. So it's kind of like a grieving of this experience, and this like American dream to an extent of this like melting pot, all that kind of stuff. Like, we're seeing that it just doesn't exist in that way, that people are being harmed because of how they look, their immigration status, where they're from, how they talk, like all those things are just happening to people. And so that takes away that experience that we may have dreamed of. And so to me, that's like a pretty severe grieving process you have to have in general, even without losing someone.
Absolutely. Even if you're just kind of quote unquote bystander, or seeing the news, or seeing our country change and people that you love be taken away, it's a grieving process on so many levels, both collectively and individually, and the family system. And so this absolutely impacts everybody in different ways.
Yeah.
So, yeah, great.
Also, I did see a question popped up.
I don't, oh yeah, great. So I see a question here, and it says, and I'm pretty sure these questions are viewable by everyone, so I'll say the name here. It's Diepti says, it is moral injury, and it changes the trajectory of all the lives impacted, possibly for multiple generations.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So true. That's such a great point, because that like feeds into the like generational trauma systems that we talk about, and those experiences have happened before, and we know like biologically those things carry over across, you know, like generations of people, right? Like grandkids, grandparents, like all those experiences as we look back on things like chattel slavery, all those kind of systems were built and caused harm, and those maintained through our like blood and our genes over time. And so these things are that type of, you know, intensity of an event that's going to lead to that forever.
And I want to emphasize that word you said, the biological piece. It's not figurative what you're saying, that it's in our blood, it's in our genes. Literally in our blood, in our genes. Stress and trauma gets passed down, and it's a fascinating thing that happens for us as a species, but also a very sad one, that this trauma is not just impacting us now, but for generations it can and does. And so great question and great considerations here.
Yeah, it shows that communal experience kind of maintains over time, whether it's good or stressful or traumatic, like our experiences are tied to each other forever. And I think that's like a positive reflection on community, but also it shows like that what's happening now is far beyond a moment in time. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, another comment.
Great, and I see Volney Tavares, also another fascinating.
Our amazing LMFT, Volney Tavares.
She mentioned, and there's no post-trauma. It's current and it's prolonged. Absolutely, it
sits and stays right here.
Totally. It's not something that you can easily turn the chapter on. You know, it stays with us. It's kind of like background noise for a very, very long time. And so, I appreciate all of these perspectives and questions. And so keep adding those questions. We love it. Thank you.
And so even amid the chaos of recent protests, raids, we've seen moments of solidarity or even humor in the form of costumes or signs used in a protest. How do we make sense of these like conflicting emotions we feel, like solidarity and humor alongside such fear? And is there room for those conflicting emotions in our healing process?
And so I'm aware of time, so I'll keep this one relatively short here as well. But I think this is such an important question, because I'm thinking back to that protest you and I went. We went to the No Kings protest, and you know, it was a response to a lot of this, and there's a lot of we are having a response to trauma, to stress, to danger, to horrific acts. Yet, in that protest, you'll see people with signs that have humor. You'll see people dressed, and I'm not sure if people know what I'm talking about when I say that they're dressed in a frog costume. You know, I'm sure people have seen that in Portland as well. And so these two very contrasting emotions, the fear, the horror, the terror, met with humanity, and that's what it is. You know that humor, that the costume is however ridiculous it is. That's the humanity, and I think that is so vital, because when we keep our humanity, that shows resistance, and that's the biggest form of survival that we can have. That they can unfortunately take us physically, but if we show up and they can't take our humanity, if we show up with that shows that we're still here and we're still fighting, right? And so, you know, I think it's a very important thing that we have here, that we have space for understandably the horror, the tragedy, the grief of it, and also have these moments where we process in these different ways and show that human nature.
Getting out of fear and like allowing us to connect again in the end, even if it's through humor and context. And obviously there's like lines to walk with stuff like that, and like as long as you're continuing to show up and, you know, use your space and privilege to advocate, like that's what matters in the end, as long as we kind of keep maintaining those supports long beyond an event like the No Kings protest, right? We got to keep showing up in the community, keep advocating even outside of those moments.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you for those questions. I'm going to shift over, and I have some questions for you as well. So I think these are great questions, and I'm really excited to hear particularly your perspective on this as a neuropsychologist, as a pediatric neuropsychologist, and all the wealth of information that you bring to this. And so I'm always like curious what your brain says about other brains. And so the first question here is, can you speak to how ICE raids and hate lead to disruptions in family systems?
Yeah, and I think it's a really important thing to understand that these events aren't like singular, right? And when we say family system disruptions, it's far beyond just like a single family being harmed. It's disconnects in how we are feeling and connecting with each other. Because fear is being raised kind of across the board. Everyone's experiencing an increase in distress around this throughout the family system. So parents, kids, aunts, uncles, kind of like the whole system is being affected. And when that happens, it's going to lead to increased stress and dysregulation, like Dr. Talavera was talking about earlier. And then our nervous systems are overwhelmed. And then we're feeling disconnected. Right. And then we're not able to show up in the ways we may want to, right? We're showing up in the way that we can, which is okay in a lot of pockets, but it can feel really hard when you're showing up that way and you have like a kid or you have someone you're caregiving to, because you feel like it's your job to like show up for them and take care of them. So if you are reduced in your stress and your experience, then you're not going to be able to offer them the same amount. And then that's when guilt kind of comes in, right? And you're feeling guilt and you're feeling shame of not being able to be the perfect parent all the time, not being able to be the perfect friend, all those kind of things, instead of reflecting on the issue here is not with us. The issue here is the systems at play. The systems are built to harm us, and that's what we're experiencing. We're having natural responses to violence. We're having natural responses to fear. We are not making stuff up. This isn't individual. Again, this is like all of us connected and being forced to disconnect and individualize. And when we turn into that and we start to try and take it all on our own, that's when the stress overwhelms us. That's when we can't manage it, because of course not. Why would you be able to manage it on your own? Because you're up against a whole system of oppression. And those things are just going to cause a lot of pain. And you know, we're seeing all this in the context of like punishment-based systems. And punishment-based systems are things that are like taught to us from a very early age. If you do something wrong, the appropriate response should be harm comes to you. Whether that's being removed from a class as a kid, whether that's having like a belt to your ass, you know, like those kind of things are like built into our experiences, that if someone does something wrong, we should harm them in some way or remove them or isolate them. And so when that happens and we see that kind of early experience, that's what allows things like this to feel acceptable, right? When someone does something like break the law, our response, it makes sense in our brain that they should be punished and they should be attacked. And that's how these things are able to grow. And when that happens, when our systems are built on punishment and harm, that's when we're gonna, again, think it's okay for harm to come to someone we care about, to someone we know. And that's when those systems really break and fracture, when we think harm is an okay response to something, instead of understanding that like any system like this that's leading to distress and ending in harm needs to be fixed or dismantled entirely or started from the bottom, rather than something that needs to be slightly adjusted, right? These systems are working the way they're built to do, and we need to stop those things to allow ourselves to connect and kind of come together. You know?
It's so fascinating that how much of this is like ingrained in us with punishment. Like I'm just thinking about like, I mean, I remember seeing other kids and myself too, like punished in school for not, you know, doing X, whatever it is, and then and like expecting that punishment, and how much of that like is ingrained in us later on in life, and how that changes our worldview.
Yeah,
it's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it's that experience of like when you're a kid and you get in trouble in class, they send you to the hallway, right? And that's the same reflection as like when you're an adult and you steal food because you don't have any money, then you get sent to jail. You get sent to the hallway, you get removed from the space, and that's supposed to be something that we view as all right. So that can bubble and grow into stuff we're seeing of ICE, which is like the most extreme version of a punishment-based system, which is just tearing families apart and disrupting systems.
Right. Yeah, I love it, the perspective here, broadening the perspective. Another question for you here. I really love this question, and I'm sure a lot of people here might have this one as well. What should I tell my kids about ICE?
Yeah, and it's a question that I get a lot, and it's a really like stressful question to kind of understand. And what I mean by that is like there's so many levels that go into anything talking about kids, like your developmental phase, your own like family's kind of worldview, your own experiences. And like when we talk about the different ages of development, that changes what we communicate to kids. And so even outside of whatever your kind of belief system is, you have to understand that this is a stressful environment occurring to people, and harm is coming to people. And that's like a fact, right? There's not like a debate around that point. So when we're talking to kids, we have to understand for a younger kid, like a 3 to 6 year old kind of range kid, you're not going to be able to necessarily talk about the events, but you can talk about the emotional experience. You can open the door for sharing emotional things that may be held within, because they might not and likely can't verbalize these experiences that well, but they're probably noticing the tension rise. They're noticing the bubbling of experience for all of us as adults, as their peers, like everyone. And so when that happens, we can often see those things pop up through things like play, where play may shift and be more aggressive. You might see changes in how they behave at school. You may see that response of more dysregulation at home that they can't necessarily put into words. Because for a lot of times, kids in that age range, emotional expression of any kind of like difficult emotion is usually like anger or dysregulation in these kind of like bigger ways, because their brains just aren't at the point to really put those things into pockets and know what's anxiety, what's worry, what's depression, what's sadness, all those kind of things. So we see that, and so opening the door through play can be really helpful, and communicating the emotional aspect of it. Whereas when we get to like school age kids, like a little bit younger but into the school process, what we really want to do is focus on facts. So talking about this is actually what's occurring, this is actually what's happening, and that it's not right. Because a lot of times kids in that age range, their view on the world is very binary. It's either like this is good or this is bad. And this is like a bad thing, and we have to like help them understand that experience. So when you're talking about this, it's like factually, like people are being separated from their families. People are being taken from their homes, and that is bad, right? And that's unfair. Like making sure we clarify that aspect for them so they can really understand that discrepancy that's occurring, while also like talking to them at their developmental level of like the fairness aspect of it all and how that's so disconnected. So we really focus on that piece there, whereas when they get a little older and you're getting into like teenage years developmentally, where there's a lot of complexity going on, a lot of like input, right? They're getting way more input than younger kids from peers, from social media, all that kind of stuff. That's when we go a little more direct, right? We want to be very, very overt about what we're seeing and what's happening, so we can kind of talk to them about it and meet them where they're at. A lot of this is going to require opening the door. Like kids aren't going to want to like talk to you, right? Like kids don't like, if you say, hey, how are you feeling? You're going to get a fine, you're going to get an okay. But if you can open that door and share your experience when they're a little bit older, it allows them to come to you when they're noticing those things happen, because they may not be able to kind of understand and integrate that process quite yet. But when we come together, we can allow that to be held a little bit more.
Yeah. So much there that, I'm sure many people didn't think about. And one thing that just struck me was, I often think of like, okay, the thing I'm trying to protect my kids from is, or my kid from is like, okay, if she watches the news and she has an emotional reaction to that news in that moment, and what I'm hearing from you is like, that is not the end of the story. It's that experience can also come up for her kids later on in play, in other interactions, and not necessarily just in that moment, and we're trying to shield them from that moment. It's shield them from also, or help them through other experiences as well.
Yeah. Kids, like, their most effective way of communicating is through their play and through their interaction, long before, they can put words into it. Like, it's something that, like, as adults, we don't do enough, so we don't, like, share our emotional expressions quite as often unless we're being active about it, which is a really, like, I would say unfair way to kind of understand our emotions, because it's only verbal, right? It's only logical, instead of letting yourself feel it and express it and letting it out in different ways. It's just a really important thing to do, and opening that door for kids can be really helpful.
I love it. There's a great question here online for you. I'm also curious to know, how do you explain who the perpetrators are for the younger ones? They want to know, who are the bad guys? How do you approach them?
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting question, because for younger kids, like, developmentally, it's really hard to kind of understand those processes, but it can be a really great time to talk about, and like for this, I'm probably thinking like 5, 6, 7, 8 and up kind of range, is like talking about equity versus equality, of like helping kids not necessarily understand like who the bad guy is, but that like things are unfair for certain people based on how they look, based on where they're from, based on their experiences in these ways, so they can understand that those people are going to be harmed more often, and that, again, that is wrong, that we're like sharing that experience is unfair and it's not right. And also that it's very real. a lot of times we want to protect kids from all these emotional experiences, and I get it, like it makes sense, but also this is something that they can't avoid. They're going to experience this. It's in the world, it's in the ether, and it's going to be really hard not to let that kind of take us over. And so the more open we can be as adults and take that role on for them of talking about and expressing it like you would with anything else that's meaningful to you as a parent, and showing that and modeling that for them is going to be really critical, because if we don't, it's going to lead to them trying to process and experience those emotions outside of you, outside of the safety of that attachment and relationship they built with you as a parent or a caregiver, or even like teachers. We want to like step into that space first so they can follow us in, instead of waiting for them to hit that dysregulation or hit that overwhelmed experience or notice those things and then feel overwhelmed.
Love it. Yeah. The great question here, Deepti, and I see a follow-up question to that. Is it okay to address the issue of misuse / abuse of authority with them?
Yeah, I would say, and it depends on the age, and not from a like you shouldn't do it, but from just a developmental understanding, because like we're ingrained at a very young age to like, you have to respect authority or else again you deserve punishment, you deserve pain, like all those kind of things. And so helping people understand and think for themselves is a really critical part of development. But at an early age, that piece is a lot of just instilling your values as parents. And part of that is thinking for yourself, but instilling your own experiences. The worldview you have is really important for kids developmentally to have and share and connect with you on. And then as they get older, they start to develop their own prongs from that, or differences in that, or differing worldviews. But at an early age, it's about sharing your experience and opening the door for them to talk about it when they're ready, because they may not be ready to kind of dive into it during that experience, but they know the door's open and they know where you're at, right? So they can just come to you in that space instead of wondering where you are.
I love that, kind of keeping the door open for these conversations and not having like, I'm gonna only have one conversation about this and then close this. It's about kind of keeping that open.
Or being too afraid to have it, right? Sure. Like a lot of times we're too afraid to put stress and pain on a kid, and then they're left to figure it out on their own when they hit that wall. And like, again, it's like the goal is protection, but it still kind of leads to that experience of them having to navigate it independently. And we want them to feel safe and secure that like my parent has it, right? And then I can follow their lead. And maybe I decide to do something different, but I already know I got the safe pathway. I already know I have that security. Yeah.
I'm gonna jump ahead. I had a question for you, but I feel like you answered part of it already. And the more time I really love these other questions for you as well. So I'm gonna jump ahead for you. The next question I have here, and we can come back to the other one if we have more time. What should my child do if they see someone come into contact with ICE or they get confronted by ICE themselves?
Yeah, and it's like a scary proposition and it's a scary experience. And I think it reflects on a bigger topic of like, what do any of us do in that kind of scenario? And I think the thing we have to start with is recognizing that we as individuals cannot necessarily combat those scenarios. And so if we're in that situation and we haven't taken the time to build that connection, build that community, working with groups like 805 and DocuFund, like groups that are gonna have those resources and rapid response teams to support us so we know who to go to, is gonna be so critical to navigating that space. Because like standing up and using your privilege in a space is a good idea, but also it can lead to like violence. And we have to make sure we're not trying to like do it on our own. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but you should do it knowing what to do and how to navigate it with the groups of support that we already have. And then the side to do with yourself and for kids is like, we want to take the pressure again off them to have to do it. And so there's two ways we do that. One is by like parents showing up in a space already, doing that for them and taking the onus on for them, teachers as well. And then the second piece is like giving them the ability to share that information without having to know it. And that's through things like red cards, which are things we have here and we can send anyone who needs information, but it goes over what the child's rights are, just the 4 points of like, I do not have to answer your questions, I do not have to let you into my home or into my space, I do not have to sign anything. It has all those things on there, and then it has a description on the other side of them sharing the information that recognizes their 4th and 5th Amendment rights in those scenarios. So instead of having a child have to know what to say, they should know I have this red card on me at all time. I pull it out and I hand it to them because that recognizes my rights. Knowing that a ICE agent is not allowed in your space legally without a warrant signed by a judge. And like that's a really important distinction to make, especially with kids who are a little bit older, is that the warrant needs to be signed by a judge, not just a piece of paper that they give you, because that can be a scare tactic. Because groups like ICE, group like the police, their job often is to instill fear to get past some of those barriers, right? They want you to be afraid, so you just comply. Because again, like we talked about, you've been taught to comply from such an early age to all these things. So you have to like teach your kids the ability to know what to say in that space and take the pressure off them to have to actually communicate it. So they just know, I give you this, right? Instead of I should say this or do this. They can do that if they want and if they're developed enough to kind of figure that out, but we want to take the onus off them to feel that pressure.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. Like a lot of what we aim to do for our kids requires a lot of like self-reflection here for our own experiences and kind of disentangle what's been ingrained for us in terms of following authority figures and doing what we're told and fearing punishment. And so a lot of this, it sounds like, is also reflection for parents, for themselves here. And so love it. And I think we have time for one more question. And
do that last one, I guess.
Yeah, sure.
Kind of talked about,
Sure. So this last question, or the next question is, what do I tell my kids when they ask why?
The last one.
Oh.
Because we kind of talked about that.
That's right. That's right. And so the next one here is, I know kids are stressed, but sometimes all we get is a fine.
I think you got to flip it over.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's another one here. Yeah.
What just happened there? This went away. Where did that happen? Oh,
there we go. Sorry about that. He has a copy here. Here's the next question. Sorry about that. So you're a neuropsychologist. So I hear. Can you talk about how this specifically affects our brains? And I'm really interested in this one, just from your take as a neuropsychologist.
Yeah, I think it's a really weird thing because like societally we know like this is hard and stressful, but what we don't recognize is that things like this change the wiring of our brain. It changes how our brain actually physically functions and fires. And so what I mean by that, and like our group here, like the phrasing we often use is like neurons that fire together wire together. And so sometimes that's a good thing, right? Learning skills, building strategies, all that kind of stuff. But it happens the reverse way too, of like, if something is hard and stressful and fearful, the part of your brain, the amygdala that's associated with fear, is activated every time, right? So it's activated in that space and leads to increased fear and disconnect from all these things. And a wild thing about the amygdala is that it also activates and fires when we're isolated, when we're separated, when we're alone. And so again, these groups are built to separate us, keep us from our community, keep us from the people in our lives. And like that includes things like people being too afraid to go to the grocery store, going to work or go to school. All these kind of things are just built up. So we're isolating out of fear, right? And so then that part of our brain gets activated. And when that part of our brain is activated, when we're isolated from each other and separated from each other, when we then see each other, our brains are trained to feel fear, right? We see each other and we feel disconnected. So these groups are working in two ways to cause our brain to literally fear each other, like fear our neighbor, fear our siblings in these spaces, is by firing that part of our brain again and again through fear tactics and through isolation, which both activate the fear center of our brain. So by the end of these experiences, we are now afraid to be in community with each other, to commune with each other, to connect with each other, because our brains have built up this isolation piece in our brain that just disconnects us all, and it just feels really hard. And again, like this is kind of like the goal. It's like psychological, biological, mental warfare occurring on our brains and our bodies, to like reference what you started with, which was talking about that nervous system activation. Like our nervous system activates, it connects with our brain, connects with our amygdala, and then we're going into space and we're just feeling torn apart. We're feeling disconnected, and we're feeling like there's no way out of it because we're isolated now, right? And that's what they want. They want to isolate us. And when we come together like this, that's when we can push back on that goal of isolation. We can change that wiring in our brain that's built to make us fear each other, and instead bring us together and change the neurons that fire together and wire together and make them those ones of connection, those binds that connect us, and do that for generations when we really focus on it as well.
Yeah, it's so interesting because the way it impacts us, like what I'm hearing from you is like, it's not just the hardware, like our body, it's like the software and our brain is impacted here. And so like our whole being is impacted by these scare tactics. The other point that you mentioned is in a very interesting way, it's like the purpose of their fear tactics. Like their purpose of their fear tactics, it sounds like from what I'm hearing from you, is partly to isolate us, to make us feel scared of not just them, but of one another as well.
Yeah.
Which is incredibly kind of giving paranoia.
Yeah,
Paranoia.
No, it's awful, right? Yeah, and like it's so wild that like that's the like function of it, and that's the part to remember is like they're wearing masks for a reason. They're not wearing masks because they're doing the right thing. They're not wearing masks because they're helping us or helping the country or anything like that. They're doing this because it's evil and because there's pain and violence behind it to maintain that power and disconnect and keep us separated. Because they know when we come together, that's when we can push back against those systems and structures that are built to oppress us.
Absolutely. Great. We're here at the 7:15 mark, right on time. And so if anybody has additional questions here, we'd love to hear them from the chat. And we'll go ahead and end. And I will also provide, if you're interested, with Spanish translations, resources as well, that I can provide as needed, or meet with you individually as well, and provide that information as well.
And if you want that information, just reach out to either of us on our email, on our Instagram account, TikTok account, whatever it is you want that you kind of found out about us through. Just reach out and we can offer any resources, and as well as this video and transcripts of it as well. And there's a video, but it has no one else is in it except for us. It's a separate thing.
We have a different camera for that.
Yes.
It took us a while to set up, but we did it. Well, with that, I want to give a few just seconds, minutes here to see if anybody has any questions here. I'm looking at the chat. Feel free to type it in. Feel free to unmute yourself and to either Dr. Lacey-Bisetty or myself.
Hey, this is Deputy Trent, and I'm a family physician. I'm actually based here in Oahu, in Hawaii.
Oh, great.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. This is really, really brave.
Thank you.
I had a question. Are either of you able to offer therapy for adults?
In California, we can, and I think that's the kind of the licensing rules is California only. But if you need help finding someone who may have a more liberated framework or system, you can just reach out to me through our website or something else, and then I can help find someone in your area who meets that kind of need.
Absolutely.
I have some like webs of connections in lots of places of people who kind of like fit our lens, because it can be hard to go into spaces and find someone that kind of understands this process and experience.
Absolutely, and if you are in California, it can be anywhere in California, and so we offer remote services, and again, both Spanish and English, and assessments as well. And I mentioned the assessment piece, especially for asylum cases, if needed, or if you know someone who needs them, you can send them our information. We'd love to help them out any way we can. Great question, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
And don't hesitate to follow up another time if you do have any other questions. Like, I know it's weird to be put on the spot in this space, so we appreciate you all, though. And also two other follow-up things. One is like we're going to be doing kind of a monthly series like this where we talk about any sort of like mental psychological thing, and the goal is over time this becomes a more collaborative space and less like us talking to people and more us communing and like having conversations, because as much as we bring our like knowledge and training in a system of psychology, is like we're also people in a community, and just as much about our communities as we do. And so if we're only siloing ourselves and our own point of views, we're missing the point of all this stuff we're talking about tonight. So that's a piece. And then also we're going to be offering, and we'll send more information about this, and I don't know if Vincent's still on or not because I can't see over there. But Vincent Gonzalez, our wonderful, amazing AMFT, is going to be offering a nature walk experience, and I'll send out the link to what he shared, but it's I can read what Vincent said because I don't want to put him on the spot. It's called Circle Keepers, a circle that is rooted in indigenous wellness traditions, We use the wisdom and support of land and community to explore topics in mental health. Our circle will be held in natural settings in Santa Barbara, and we're still figuring out the exact timeline, but it'll be once or twice a month, and we'll share that information as well if that's something you want to take part of if you're local, because it's hard to do nature virtually, unfortunately. Yeah.
With that, again, thank you everybody for joining, and again, please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions, and stay tuned. We're going to have more of these lectures coming forward in the coming months as well, and many different topics. And if you have an idea or an interest in something you'd like to know about, send us that interest, and we'd love to take a deep dive from our various perspectives here within psychology.
Yeah, and with you as well as part of it,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. Any last remarks?
No, thank you so much for being here. Like I said, community connection, that's why we're here, and just by showing up here today, I think we're showing that we want to build those binds together, and we'll continue to do so. So thank you all.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
So it should be muted for all of us.
Just want to.
Yeah, should I end it?
I think so.